Hey everybody, Ketwolski here, checking in with another one of our hashtag Star Trek Picard review discussion videos. Today we, of course, are going to be talking about Episode 5, Stardust City Rag. So, like the previous review videos that I have done, I'm going to talk about the things that I really enjoyed about the episode, kind of go into some of the things that I didn't enjoy about the episode, and then wrap it up with kind of where the plot has moved forward from this episode and some of my theories attached to that. Okay, so going down my list of things that I really enjoyed about this episode, the first thing that pops out in my mind is this Seven Domes establishing shot. I like how each of the episodes kind of has a, flashback at the beginning of it. Episode 1 was pseudo-flashback. It had a lot to do with the attack on Mars, but we're kind of going from that attack on Mars, and each episode so far has been kind of inching us 1 year closer and closer and closer to the beginning of the series. Obviously, this one was a year, sooner than the last year's episode, which was 14 years, so we're kind of getting a little bit closer and closer, and hopefully by episode 10, we actually arrive and both of the flashbacks and the actual current events of the show begin to marry up a little bit, kind of creating a nice little loop there, which I think is very exciting. I like that they did that, but I really also enjoyed that establishing shot of that particular planet. Really well done. The next thing that I really enjoyed, and I know a lot of people felt very strongly about, is Icheb's death scene. It was really brutal, but it also helped up establish Seven of Nine's kind of whole revenge plot and why she was so dead set on it. Without that background there, and just talking about it, perhaps it happening off screen, may not have felt as impactful to the viewer, so I understand why they put it on the top of this episode. And we also get a fantastic, in my opinion, a fantastic background overall for our villainess, Bjayzl. It kind of establishes how threatening and menacing she is. Again, if we just kind of went into the episode without really understanding how serious this character was, it may not have had and carried the amount of stakes that were necessary for her character to come across as a villain in this episode, because obviously you didn't spend a whole lot of time with her before she got blowed up. But I think that they did a good job of putting that at the, the kind of the beginning of this episode to kind of establish the tone for the rest of it. Side note that I do want to go ahead and mention is that is not the original actor that plays Icheb from Star Trek Voyager. The actual individual, he posted up a couple of weird things over on Twitter, kind of attacking Anthony Rapp after he made that report about how Kevin Spacey had abused him as a 14-year-old boy in his apartment and all that other stuff like that. He made some rather inappropriate comments, and regardless of your thoughts on free speech or on the, I guess you could say his position on it, whether you agree with what he said or not, it doesn't, exclude the fact that he is completely unabashedly, for what he said, and he has not really gone out to say like, hey, I'm sorry for that, or I shouldn't have said that, or whatever it is. And I think it makes sense that they would not bring him into the show simply because of those kinds of comments. Again, whether you agree with them or not is kind of irrelevant when you're talking about a professional setting and working within the Star Trek universe right now. Anthony Rapp obviously playing Paul Stamets on Discovery. It makes sense that they wouldn't bring him back, so obviously that's not the same actor, but I think they found a guy that looked pretty good for a comparison, and I thought it was well done. But in case any of you guys were wondering as to why they didn't bring back the original actor, that is probably the most likely reason. The next thing that I really enjoyed was actually this little sequence between Rios and Raffi, where they kind of like gossip a little bit about the connections that Seven of Nine and Picard have, and kind of remind the general viewing audience, obviously Trek fans know this, but reminding the general viewing audience that Seven is a former Borg, and that's why she has Borg implants, and that Picard is in fact a former Borg. Now again, a lot of Trek fans know this from his whole stint with Best of Both Worlds, and him being Locutus, and obviously the First Contact movie, so I'd say a lot of fans know that, but it was a fun way to kind of remind everybody and get every viewer up to speed as to their connection and what's going on with Seven and what's going on with these Borg implants and stuff like that, and kind of established, again, kind of connecting the tissue with our villainess, and kind of this, subplot of what's going on with removing of all these different Borg implants is that there are people who were reclaimed from the Borg separate from the artifact that we're seeing in this show, Seven being one of them, and obviously Picard being another one. Another thing that I really enjoyed was this whole sequence when they arrived at Freecloud and all of these targeted ads started to show up. I thought it was kind of funny and rather topical in some regards, because obviously now most of us know that if you're not using a VPN to mask your kind of searches and your connection, if you just go and search for something, whether it be on Google or Amazon or whatever it is, then you start to get targeted ads that appear on different websites that you're visiting that have nothing to do with that topic, and it kind of targets those things based off of your search history. So I like the fact that they expanded on that rather topical kind of, I don't want to say like watchdog thing of like Big Brother knowing all the things that you're doing, but it was like based off of your search results of your internet searches, of your future Federation internet searches, these are the ads that we targeted for you. And I like the fact that they did that. It was both humorous and also rather topical. And a lot of people asked, well, what is the deal with Agnes's ads and why was her about this weird fighting robot? I don't quite know. My theory kind of attached to that is she's dealing with a lot of internal conflict, which we find out kind of at the end of the episode. So I'm wondering if it wasn't necessarily targeted specifically based off of her searches, but maybe off of, things that she was feeling in the moment. Perhaps this AI that detects ads is something that goes beyond just search results. I'm not quite sure, but that's kind of just my theory attached to that. But overall, I thought that was a really fun sequence. The idea of Freecloud is kind of fun. Obviously in Star Trek, everybody equates vacationing to Risa, but Risa is kind of like that tropical luau kind of beachside setting. But where do you go when you really want to party hard and have a wild time? Basically the Vegas of the universe. Where does that kind of take place? And right now it kind of seems like that's Freecloud. So to me, I like the idea that Risa is the more relaxed tropical vacation spot, but Freecloud is that party hard scene where you're getting some weird sex and drugs and alcohol and all sorts of weird things are happening. And I like the fact that now they've established that this is a separate kind of location for a different type of partying. And I love the design of it too. That establishing shot of the actual city itself was really, really well done. I really liked it. I wish we actually saw more of the digital graphics on there. I thought that would have been even more fun to kind of really tack it on to show how kind of commercialized the city was. But I really, really like that design there. Speaking of Freecloud, I also like the physical location that Rios beams down to before they go into the bar. That's kind of our only glimpse as to what's really going on outside the bar and kind of the rest of Freecloud. I don't know where they shot this particular scene, but clearly it's some kind of downtown area that they redressed on the set to make it look more futuristic and make it look a little bit more alien. But I thought they did a really fantastic job, and I liked the scene. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the pseudo heist discussion that took place both in the bar as it was happening real time, and then flashing back to the planning that they were setting up inside of Picard's den on the La Serena. I thought that was fantastic. It was really, really kind of fun the way they intercut it, and it felt very heist-esque. It felt like I was watching an Ocean's 11, movie almost, where it was like they were planning out what they were going to do while it was also still happening. I thought that was really smart in terms of the edits, because they could have left the sequences separate, but editing them together gave them a different kind of pacing and interest to the audience, because we were finding out what their plan was as it was happening live on screen. So it definitely created an air of mystery and excitement for us as the viewer, and increased the pacing of those two sequences separately, which would have been fine, but putting them together like that definitely added a little bit of a fun element, which is really what this whole episode was about, which was being fun, other than, like the death sequences. Speaking of the kind of funness of this particular episode, I like the fact that Rios was trying to be like a weird pimp, even though he's like the Facers Guild, and I liked his crazy kind of over-the-top outfit. We kind of theorized in my previous video that they were going to be dressing like that to try to blend in with Freecloud, and that's kind of what happened. Is these Facers, I guess, are very flamboyant, very peacock in essence. They kind of flash their presence so it can be known. So adding the feather and having that weird suit that he was wearing, I really like that. I also really loved Picard as this weird kind of merchant, kind of person collecting bounties and doing different things with his eye patch and his beret. And he had like all of these different accents. If you watch the scene carefully, he tries to do like a French accent, but it kind of breaks in between like 2 or 3 different accents all at the same time. And I thought that was kind of funny and well done on Sir Patrick's part, because he was clearly trying to make it seem like this is Jean-Luc Picard pretending to be somebody who he's not. You got a guy playing another guy, and there was some kind of crossover there. And I like the fact that it was not perfect, because it wouldn't be perfect, because they basically just came up with this plan kind of on the spot and they just kind of rushed it. So I like that. That was really fun. Another sequence that really struck a chord with me and really stood out was the scene with Raffi and her son Gabriel. This was a very, very powerful scene, and obviously we're still kind of getting introduced to the character of Raffi and her whole background, but I talked a lot about how her drug use and alcohol dependency was very topical and a very good commentary on our current issues facing, basically the globe. I know it's a big deal here in the United States, substance abuse, but the flip side to that is when individuals start to get clean, and they've tried to get clean multiple times, and then they try to engage with their friends and their family, there's a lot of skepticism. And obviously Gabriel played that up very, very well. And some people may not like how he responded to his mother and kind of brushed her off and wanted her just to leave. But I can relate to both of those kinds of people. I relate very heavily to that scene, and I relate very heavily to Gabriel's kind of reaction there. I've been in that situation, and it's not an easy conversation to have, and it is tough. And I know a lot of people out there have either been on Raffi's side or on Gabriel's side, and I can say from experience, and I'm sure other people would say that as well, that it's not a comfortable conversation. It's not always cut and dry as to what the right answer is. Now, obviously, you don't have all the other stuff about her kind of going off the rails with this whole Mars conspiracy that obviously nobody believes her on right now, but of course that will come out later that she was right and be vindicated, and hopefully she'll be able to mend that relationship with her son. But the whole drug abuse thing probably stemmed or kind of added to that fueled paranoia, and probably continued to run her down this weird conspiracy path, and it only got worse and worse and worse for both sides, the conspiracy and the alcohol and drug abuse side. So it is interesting to see what the fallout of her actions and the ramifications of her focusing on this conspiracy and her her different addictions and stuff like that. I thought that was a really powerful scene, and I can't wait to see how that kind of hopefully resolves itself by the end of the season. Another thing that I really liked is how they established the EMH aboard the La Serena having this ability to immediately detect when somebody actually needs him to just appear. Obviously that comes in later on, but I like the fact that they spent the time to establish that in a more fun way earlier in the episode, so that when it happened at the end, there was already a bit of a precedence there. So that was really smart on the writers and obviously the directors and the showrunners and stuff like that to include that sequence. Another great moment was this sequence here with Picard and Seven kind of sharing their, I guess, journey of recovery with each other. Obviously, Seven and Picard's journey dealing with the Borg is very, very different, but they're both facing that kind of question of is my humanity still there post desimilation, and how do we really kind of cope with that? And obviously Picard's dealing with it in his way, and Seven is clearly dealing with it in her way, which is two very, very different ways, but they're dealing with a very personal journey, that is shared in some regards. A lot of people forget that Picard was a, de-assimilated Borg, and that he was completely done up with all of the extra stuff, and they've, since saved him from a lot of those implants, but not everyone was as lucky. Seven, she got a lot of her implants removed, but a lot of the stuff that was done to her was also internal to her body that simply can't be removed, and she's carrying that with her everywhere she goes, which kind of makes me wonder what internal parts are still with Picard. Are we going to see some of those things later on in the series? I don't know. I'm very excited, but I thought that was a very powerful moment between the two characters. And why I wanted Bjayzl to kind of stick around a little bit more for this series, maybe even onto season 2, and if we ever get more seasons, further on, I understand why they wanted to kind of tie up that story a little bit. I wish we had gotten to spend more time with her. However, I really enjoyed this explosion of her being disintegrated by Seven. It definitely felt like a good vindication for what happened to Icheb at the beginning, and obviously her whole revenge subplot that was occurring in this episode. I thought that was really great that they kind of included that, and it was Seven that got to pull the trigger. I actually thought that they were just going to have her leave and then not go back, and we were going to deal with, Bjayzl later, but having her go immediately right back and just waste everybody was a nice little twist there that I wasn't exactly expecting. I also really liked how Rios and Picard kind of joked a little bit about his fee needing to increase because he realized they needed to fly into Romulan space, but then he was like, all right, I'll do it. It really adds a depth to the character to showcase that he is really, really, really kind of getting more invested in what's going on with this mission and kind of enjoying the company of Picard and the rest of his crewmates that are there with Agnes and Raffi and, Elnor and hopefully some other people, I don't know. But he's clearly getting a little bit more invested, a little bit more excited in some regards about being a part of a team again and actually having a purpose rather than opposed to probably aimlessly flying through the quadrants, doing different shipping or merchant jobs or travel jobs or whatever it was. So I like the fact that they're spending some time to kind of demonstrate Rios's growth as a character a little bit in that fun little sequence there between the two of them. It only lasted a few moments, but there was a lot of depth to the interaction between those different characters and really showing, Rios's kind of rebirth into being more excited about living and being a part of a family/crew. The final thing that I really enjoyed about this episode was obviously Bruce Maddox, specifically his kind of, confession/death sequence at the end. Now, we learned that Agnes and him have a personal relationship, which we'll get kind of into in my plot kind of breakdown there. But I like the fact that it was Agnes is the one who killed him, and his death sequence was rather unexpected. I expected her to do something with him, or maybe this death sequence was going to occur maybe in the next episode or the episode after. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. I thought we were going to spend a little bit more time with Maddox, but that was a great like little twist at the end there, that not only was she and Maddox lovers, but she's the one that let him die from his internal injuries. And that sequence where he's just essentially like, I don't know, like dying to death of internal injuries, and the blood is kind of going to his face, and he's like struggling to survive, and the EMH appears, and it's a very, very powerful moment where the EMH is trying to get her to do something, and then she just deactivates him. And again, I like how they added that sequence at the beginning of the episode to kind of tie that back into the end where the EMH appears, and I'm confident that that's going to come up later, that the EMH observed Agnes disengaging the, you know, different medical devices that were keeping Maddox alive, and then just disintegrated him and canceled the program so that he couldn't assist her in any way with saving Maddox's life. I'm confident that's going to come up later, but I thought that was a very, very, very powerful sequence. So now onto the things that I didn't like, and honestly, the only thing is kind of just a personal gripe, which is that I wanted to spend more time on the exterior portions of Freecloud. I wish we got to experience more of what is going on. I wanted to see more of the nightlife, more of the seedy underbelly, more of the poppin' happening aspects of Freecloud. They kind of built it up over the last couple episodes, and we immediately went to the bar, which was fun, but I wish we had spent more time external to the bar. But that's like a bit of a nitpick on my part. That's not really anything wrong with the episode. It's just more of a desire for me. So that was like the only really thing. Other than that, I thought the episode again was really solid. I thought it was very well done. It definitely isn't in my top tier ones. You know, I think episode 1 and 4 are still kind of battling it out in my mind as for the best episode so far, but this was definitely a very solid episode. Okay, so now we got to move on to the plot movements and some of my theories attached to that. So the big things that we learned in this episode was A, what's going on with Maddox, and B, why these Asha sisters even exist. So one of the big things was Daj and Soji have a mom AI subroutine, which we have seen, you know, in various iterations. Both Soji contacts us, her mom, and also Daj did, I think, in the very first episode. But both the AI subroutines did different things for them. For the mom subroutine for Soji, it looked like Soji was trying to ask her specific questions about what was going on with her sister, and maybe even more questions about who she is, and kind of figuring out that she's an android. And the mom subroutine clearly activated some kind of sleeping trigger words that put her to sleep to kind of, I guess, throw her off the trail of figuring out who she is. And then the Daj one, obviously that Daj was already activated, was like, go and find Jean-Luc Picard, he can protect you, which I think that is probably something that Maddox coded into the AI subroutine that they were going to be able to contact. So now we know that for sure the mom isn't existing at all, so we don't even know exactly at all what their background really is. We do know from this show so far that their identities haven't existed past the last 3 years, so I'm assuming that's when they were created, or they were up to something else, and then they, you know, got, you know, different identities and then moved on as the Soji sisters and the Daj and Asha, you know, sisters. You know, it's unclear if they've been around for a long period of time, or if that 3-year marker was where they kind of, you know, became into existence, and then Maddox kind of put them out into the quadrant to go do something. Speaking of why Maddox put them out into the quadrant, we find out that he did this specifically to find out what's going on with the A500/android synthetic life forms being banned within the Federation. He sent them out there to uncover the truth of what is really going on and what happened with the attack on Mars. He feels very strongly that the Tal Shiar and even the Federation are behind a massive cover-up of something that occurred, and they're not quite sure what, but he sent the girls out there to try to uncover the truth, I assume, in order to essentially vindicate all of the different synthetics, that it wasn't the synthetics' fault, that there was another reason behind the attack on Mars and why they went ahead and went crazy and started killing everybody. So he did that intentionally to try to do that. Now, what Soji's role is at the Borg Cube and how that's going to help that plot, and what Daj's role was going to the Daystrom Institute, kind of makes a little bit more sense, but what their individual roles were mission-wise is unclear at this point. Now, obviously, we just have Soji that we're following right now, so it's unclear how her uncovering of the Borg and figuring out what's going on with the cubes will necessarily tie directly back into the synthetic life forms going crazy and attacking Mars, but obviously we're going to figure that out before the end of the season. Speaking of cover-ups, another plot point that we kind of got during the discussion between Raffi and Gabriel is he mentions that his mom had gone on this off the rails with this whole conspiracy thing about the attack on Mars, and mentions an organization known as the Conclave of Eight. Now, what that is, What its relationship is to the attack and who's in the 8 conclave is definitely unknown to me. I have no idea. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that, but I really don't have any good theories about that right now. I assume it has something to do with secret organizations getting together and deciding certain things for the entire quadrant and how they're going to shape things. Maybe Section 31's a part of the conclave, the Tal Shiar, and maybe other secretive organizations are in there. I don't know, but it's definitely something, and I kind of threw it in really quickly, but I wanted to mention that to you because I feel like it's probably going to come up later. The other big thing and kind of the larger reveal of this particular episode is Agnes has already been hiding from Picard the fact that her and Maddox had a relationship. She definitely hid that from him. It's unclear as to why, but B, I originally theorized that she was under some kind of mind control, telepathic, influence from Commodore O, from her mind meld that we saw in the, Picard teaser trailer. And we know that that happened when she got confronted by her outside of the Daystrom Institute. I think it was back in episode 3, but we didn't get to see the mind meld piece happen in that episode. I assume we'll get it in a flashback sequence later. But she apparently showed Agnes something to do with the android life form, specifically with the Asha sisters, that causes her to feel regret and to feel like, and she said, I believe, like, I need to atone for helping create these AI life forms. Now, I don't know how Commodore O knows what's going on with the Asha sisters. I don't know how people continue to refer to them as the Destroyers, if they're in some kind of, cahoots with some kind of future technology, if they're worried about another control AI popping up and it's related back to the control AI from Discovery Season 2. It's unclear what she showed Agnes for her to feel so strongly that she feels super guilt-ridden and that she murdered and allowed the love that, I assume her love of her life, Bruce Maddox, her mentor, I assume, her close coworker that she worked on making all of these synthetics, to die on the table. She essentially killed him. Now, what she could have showed her to lead her to that point is unclear. It's still unclear if she's not under some kind of influence, but I didn't get that really from this sequence. The feeling that I got was that she is so guilt-ridden over what is going to happen, or what could potentially happen with the Asha sisters, specifically Soji, that she has to do this, and that's why she's on this mission with Picard, to ensure that whatever happens, that the AI life forms aren't allowed to do something. But what that is kind of beyond me. Okay, everybody, that kind of wraps up my review video. I hope that you guys and gals enjoyed it. If you did, please throw up a like down below. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do that. And while you're still here, why don't you go ahead and throw up some of your ideas and theories and reviews and comments about this episode. Did you really enjoy it? What did you think about this kind of pseudo-heist sequence? And what did you think about the situation with Maddox and Agnes and this reveal, a little bit about what's going on with the Asha sisters? I'm curious to hear what all of you guys and gals think about that. Get your comments up down below, and we'll go ahead and get the conversation started. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies!